Hey everyone, we are going to go ahead and do the first demo for raster data models using ArcGIS Pro. The very first thing that you'll want to have done, if you haven't already, is to go ahead and download the sample data from the Canvas site. It's this Lab 1 data right here. That'll eventually bring you to, when you open it up on a Windows computer, it'll look like this. You just want to get all these files onto your Google Drive in some sort of folder labeled GIS, and then maybe Lab 1 within there. I'm going to be pretty meticulous about how I organize these things, but I just want y'all to sort of see what it might look like. I'll show the demonstration of how to link your Google Drive during the live session in class. But basically, there's just an app that you download and run. It should be on all the Windows computers on campus at least. So I'm going to extract these. I'm not going to put them into this folder. I'm going to go over here onto my Google Drive here. I've got two of them on mine. And I've got a folder on here called GIS. And I'm going to just create a new folder in here and call it Lab 01 Raster. Once I'm in there, I'm going to extract all those things out to there. They'll come up. And what you'll notice is that they look like images. You could load them in a regular graphics program because they're just raster data, but they're not gonna load quite right because they're meant to be put into a GIS program as well. So just sort of leave them as is, and then you're gonna switch over and load up ArcGIS Pro. Once it loads, it'll look something like this. We have our options, sort of how we're going to create our new document. We could choose a catalog, we could choose these three-dimensional scenes, but in most cases, you'll just start with map here. So just go ahead and start with that. It's going to ask you about making a project. This is probably a good idea. I'm going to encourage you to do one of these per unit, per lab that we do, but you could probably do them more systematically if you wanted to, and just have one with a bunch of different tabs on it if you needed to. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Lab 01. And I do not want to stick it here because this will go away if you're working on a lab computer. What you'd want to do instead is come over here and again, go off to your this PC, wherever your Google Drive is mounted. And I would say if it was me, I would put it into that GIS folder that I created. I'm just having trouble getting to it. And then it'll have a lab 1 in there. It'll create a folder for it. Honestly, we could have done it this way as well. Probably would have made more sense. I'd already had one up. That's the only reason it's asking me that. So it's going to create this. Should have, I think I hit cancel too soon. So I'm just going to go ahead and redo it. Put it into this PC, Google, My Drive, GIS. Raster. It's creating a project. Then it's going to bring up this thing that looks like a map document that we may have seen elsewhere if we've used any other GIS programs. Yours may look a little different. You may not have the Python window down here to begin with. You may not have the symbology tab up. If you don't, then you can just close these things. This just means that I've used the program before on my computer. Probably end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So when it comes time to add things in, we have all sorts of different stuff we can do. There's a couple different ways we can add our things in if we need to. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is probably the most simple of them. So I could come over here and I can create new catalog views and things like that. But if I'm on my map tab over here, there's this button right here that says add data. What that's going to let me do is go find things on the hard drive and add them in. Because we'll talk about this in class a little bit as well, but ArcGIS, most GIS programs, they're not actually bringing the data in to the file, the map that you're creating, they're linking to it elsewhere. So we're adding things in. We're not opening a new file necessarily. The map is the file. The other things are links to the actual data elsewhere on the database, on the computer, anywhere else you might have them. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just click this Add Data button. And this is going to bring up a thing that looks kind of generally like a normal computer thing. Mine, as I moved it around, you saw it had a few other things. It has stuff about my account. It has stuff about all sorts of other things on here. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and go into Google Drive right here and just go back into where I was before. Oops, wrong one. GIS, Lab 1 Raster. And I have sitting in there all of my files from here. So remember, you're going to choose this week Potato Creek, Rum Village, or St. Patrick's Park. You can change the first week. It's not a big deal if you decide you don't like it. Whenever I'm doing the demos, and if you're following along, you're going to want to add in the ones that are Notre Dame. The Notre Dame campus ones are the ones we use for sort of surprise or the demonstrations. So I'm going to choose this Spot 1987 Notre Dame right here. Spot is the name of a satellite. Landsat TM is the name of a satellite. The little icon off to this at the edge here is telling me that it's raster data. It looks like a little grid like that. So I'm just going to choose this one right here. I'm going to single click on it and then hit OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to add that thing in. If it asks me anything about anything else, like pyramids, that kind of stuff, just say yes. Mine might be defaulting to not doing that. And if I look at it, you can sort of see that, yes, it's raster data. It's sitting on top of a web map, so it looks like a regular map already for us. It just occurred to me that the Notre Dame one is a little messed up. That's why it's off slightly. The rest of them should be okay. Getting ahead of myself, but I can turn things off and on over here. I have different base maps. Probably worth taking a little time at this point to just get used to playing with the software a little bit to find out what's going on. This Explorer thing that's on the Map tab is the tool you use for most of that. As you bring it over, you can see that you can click and drag. You can do your scroll wheel to zoom in and out. You have all sorts of other tools on there. Other things that might be useful just to see, you have this button right here that looks like a globe that'll zoom to the full extent of the map. In this case, that zooms you to the entire world, so not very useful. You have these back button and forward button that'll go back to the previous extent that it's been at. It just moves you back and forth on the zoom things. You have these things that zoom you in like kind of a fixed amount in or out as well. So you have all sorts of different tools on there that you can play around with. Other things that might be useful, you have the ability here to change your base map. So right now it's got this topographic one, but you could switch it over to be satellite imagery. You can't do anything with it. It's just a layer in the background, just like Google Maps is, but they can look kind of cool. So you can play around with those a little bit if you want to. You also have the ability to go to specific latitude and longitudes or to hit a certain scale also. There should be a scale box that you can enter in if you need to, right down here at the bottom. There is also on insert, you can create a layout that'll let you actually make something that you could print. We'll get to that much later in the semester, but I just want you to know that that's there as well. There's other options in here. But the first thing we're going to be doing is working with raster data, doing some of the things that we talked about in the demo that we talked about in the class. So we have this Notre Dame spot image in here right now. You can see already, if you look over here, that it's got a color ramp. It goes from the darkest values are 21, and the highest values are 255. That's already got a stretch on it because it doesn't go from 0 to 255. It's got a little bit of a stretch on it already. So there's a couple different ways we can get at manipulating this a little bit more. One way is if we go to right-click on the layer in the table of contents. This is what's doing this a lot. If we right-click on the layer somewhere, we can come down to the symbology word. You could also usually just double-click on the color bar right there, and it'll bring you into it. It'll bring up this other tab. It's telling us what are we doing with it, how are we symbolizing this layer. It's one band, so it just says band 1 there. We could change it to be other things if we needed to. In this case, we're going to leave it on a stretch. Right now it's doing a % clip. We could change it so it was doing a minimum maximum. So the minimum value is 21, the maximum value is 255. It's just spreading those straight out. We could change it so it's doing a standard deviation. You can see how it sort of brings out the colors a little bit more on it. So we have these kind of uniform stretches that we talked about a little bit in class that you can work with. And if you want to do your own, and this is part of the assignment, you can come over into right here where it says histogram. this brings that histogram out for you. Right now it's doing a standard deviation, so it's found the mean of the gray, it's made the minimum there, it's made the maximum there, stretched the colors out all the way. You can see anything that was above right there in the gray one has now become a 255. That's why there's a big line right there. Anything that's below the 21 right there has become 0, which is why there's a little bit of a line right there. So you can manipulate this if you wanted to. You could move it so that it's even a little bit more. And then even a little bit more that way. So you can start sort of experimenting around with what you want the image to look like and how you want to do it. You can play with the number of standard deviations. You could play with whether it's doing this desire to equalize the histogram or whatever else it's doing with it. So you can edit it around however you want. It's part of the assignment to be able to do that. But when you're done, I would say go ahead and come back in here and just bring it back over to be standard deviation or something that's a little bit more standard. Leave it as is and kind of work your way back from there. So nice, easy way to manipulate the stretch a little bit. It can be a good way to visually see more contrast in the image, to be able to visually see sort of what it is you're interested in pulling out of the image itself. However, there are a couple of other things that we might want to do with our raster data also. In particular, that's the convolution filters that we talked about in class a little bit. Those are like a lot of these sorts of programs like we have where there's these tabbed things that bring up the ribbons underneath them. What we have clicked changes what we see over there. So if we have a raster layer, we get the raster layer word over here that has some things we can do with it. We can play with the transparency. We can play with the stretches a little bit over here as well if we weren't doing it in the other part. But we also have this ability to press this imagery button. And that's where we get to the convolution filters and the things that actually make a new image. They manipulate the image in a more permanent way. So if you go in here to imagery and then raster functions, if you choose raster functions right there, it's going to bring up a whole bunch of different stuff right here. And these are all sorts of crazy things that we can do if we really want to. But the section that we're going to be looking for is convolution, which is sort of hidden a little bit within here. We're going to start with appearance. We're going through appearance, and then we have convolution. So that's going to bring up that kernel that we talked about. And if we really wanted to, we could manipulate these by hand, but we could also just choose some of the ones in the drop down here. So we talked about sharpen filters before, going to increase the spatial frequency. Choose it. It's going to create a raster layer, hit create new layer. It'll fail to run it for whatever reason. So sorry, I needed to change the spot right there in that. I'm going to sharpen it, I'm going to run it. And you can begin to see kind of what's happened there. We can click these up off and on. So you can see it's increased the spatial frequency. You can see the edges a lot more clearly on there. We could do the same thing if we wanted to run it on the original. And we wanted to do a smoothing filter instead. We'll do a 5x5 smoothing. Create a new layer. You see it's blurred it. It's decreased the spatial frequency. It's made it a lot flatter in there. You could also save these permanently if you were running them right now. I just went ahead and did it as a single one. But instead of create a new layer, you could do save as, and it would just write it out as a permanent file. Okay. So other things that might be useful for y'all to be able to work with. So far we've looked at the filters and the stretches on a single band image, on a grayscale image. I do want y'all to also take a look at a multispectral image. To get to that, you go back to map, add data, and then that other one that I gave you, the Landsat TM, is a multispectral image. I'm going to do something. I want y'all to not do this. If I double click on this, it actually brings me into all of the bands. I could add them. I could add them individually if I wanted to. Don't do that. If that happens, go back up, click on it once, just so it's highlighted, not slow click, and then add it in. Then it comes in as an actual image like this. And what we have is this image. Right now it's saying that band 1 is the red gun, or is the band 1 is in the red channel, band 2 is in the green channel, band 3 is in the blue channel. We can experiment around with that a little bit. This looks to be kind of like true color. You can sort of see buildings and things like that. If we want to, we can, sorry, I meant to go to the symbology for it. Right click on it, go to symbology. It'll let us do it here. Can also get to it up in here in band combinations. Right now, we're defaulting to what it says is natural color, and then color infrared would switch it over to be like 412 or 432. Those are the combinations that are usually used for showing that those false color near infrared vegetated things are redder. You can also do 432. That's another real common one instead of 412. So you can play with the bands in the symbology, or you can sort of hit some of the pre-built ones over here. We'll talk about band combinations with different types of satellite when we get further into things. But I do want y'all to just sort of see what these look like and to be able to at least change these things over to be a full true color image. And again, just like we could before, we can play with transparency. We can play with all sorts of different things. Now, the last thing I want y'all to see is this idea of being able to look at multiple things at the same time, multiple raster data layers. You've seen me come over and turn them off and on to kind of do that a little bit, but there's other ways to do that. And some of the best ones are on this raster layer tab. When I have a raster layer selected over here, I can press this flicker button, and it's just gonna, at 500 milliseconds, flash it back and forth for me. So I can just turning it off and on for me so I can kind of visually compare like, whoa, those do not line up well at all. You can see that there. I can increase this or decrease it, and it'll flicker faster or slower. Right now it's going to slow, it's about 10 times slower. You can go down real low too if you want to, but it starts to get a little bit, I don't know, nausea inducing. So you're usually leaving it at about a half a second, or 5,000 is probably one of the better ones, or 500 is half a second. So. Okay, and then there's the swipe command also. What swipe does is looks like nothing happens when I click it, but once it's clicked, you see my mouse now becomes an arrow when I'm over here, and that arrow is pointing in the direction that I can pull off. So if I click, I'm then just sort of pulling one layer off of another. So you can see, well, a couple things. One, you can see how much clearly you can see that golf course there on campus when it's in one type of image versus another. Might not have been built yet, actually, in the original one. Oh, no, it's in there. You can see the lakes. You can see all sorts of other things. So the swipe lets you see what's underneath. The flicker is going to kind of do it at defined intervals pretty quickly between them. So that's really it for kind of beginning first week working with raster data. The other thing I want y'all to know is that you do want to probably save this document. If you hit save project, it's going to save everything temporarily. If you have saved the things that you want, and you have put the file that you're working with on your Google Drive, you can load it all back up. You're not going to necessarily lose anything the way you would in older versions, but you're not actually saving the data when you do that. You're just saving links to them. There's a database that's sitting there that has all of your project files and things with it. But do just be careful with that. We're going to try really hard throughout the semester to export things not into the temporary database that ArcGIS Pro works with, but to separate files so we can add them between weeks. But we may not always get to that point. So I just want y'all to be aware of that. Otherwise, your assignment, when it comes time to do it, I'll talk you through how to do screenshots when we're working in class. And when we're working in class with these screenshots, what you're going to really end up doing is just pasting them into a Word document and then turning that into me. And I'll talk through how to do all that in class a little bit while I can move the mouse around and things like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I will see y'all back next week for week 2 when we start working with vector data.